Quite a few people have shown interest in my latest video, which is all about a map which appeared in the 1813 World Atlas, and it was a map that was written by a man called John Pinkerton. And inside this World Atlas is a map of New Zealand, which actually shows quite incredibly New Zealand as a country prior to the eruption of Lake Taupo. And the eruption of Lake Taupo happened in the year, happened 25,000 years ago. And this is the map here we're talking about. So you can actually see this video on Pinkerton's map in 1813 depicts New Zealand prior to Taupo eruption 25,000 years ago. And you'd have to watch this before you listen to what I'm saying here. And yes, I'm fairly sure this map is very, very accurate actually. It's too accurate to be chance, that's for sure. So please watch this first. And we'll do a bit more investigation into who John Pinkerton was. So he actually was born in Scotland in Lanark. And he went to grammar school in 1764. Grammar School of Lanark, and in 1776 he published his first book, Elegy, called Craig Miller Castle. So in 1780 he visited London, principally with the view of procuring copies of rare books. And I think this is where he has obtained the 25,000-year-old map of New Zealand. So in 1769, Captain Cook first visited New Zealand, and they always say it's Captain Cook's discovery of New Zealand, but in actual fact the person who financed the entire expedition was Lord Joseph Banks, the botanist. So Joseph Banks was a very wealthy man and a lord of the realm, and he was an explorer. And we should also point out that there was on board of the HMS Endeavour a Tahitian man by the name of Tupaea. And Tupaea was a high priest of the religion of Mauwee. And what Captain Cook said about Tupaea was that he, everywhere that he went in the Pacific, all the people knew who Tupaea was. And it was Tupaea who showed Captain Cook the way to New Zealand. And where Tupaea was aiming the ship was actually Tologa Bay, for a specific reason, because at Tologa Bay there was a kind of religious settlement of the priests of Mauwee. So the Endeavour actually missed Tologa Bay and went to what they called Poverty Bay, where there was several people murdered, unfortunately, getting the trip off to a very bad start. And from there the HMS Endeavour sailed south where they eventually turned round and began to sail north. It's presumed that the ship turned round because of winds, maybe, but in actual fact, personally myself, I believe that Tupaea, the Tahitian priest, was guiding the HMS Endeavour specifically to Tologa Bay. So they turned the ship around and started heading back up the coast, the east coast of New Zealand. And as they travelled northwards, they were greeted by some canoes. And this is a very strange thing because the response of these Maoris was completely and utterly different to those that were down in Poverty Bay. And these Maoris came along board the ship and they had their war canoe lifted up upon the ship, and they say the crew of this war canoe stayed on board the HMS Endeavour on the deck all night, whilst the leaders of the war canoe went downstairs, and there they spent the night conversing with Captain Cook and Joseph Banks. And what Captain Cook said about them, or was it Joseph Banks, said that the leader of this war canoe was a man of infinite grace. This doesn't sound like a typical explanation of a Maori person of 1769. And they also said about them that they refused to eat any food while they were there. So they were obviously some kind of religious order. Eventually the HMS Endeavour and the HMS Resolution was guided back to Tologa Bay, where the ship was led into the harbour by the Maori tribes that lived there. And there they rewatered the ship, which was certainly something that needed to be done in a peaceful environment. And whilst they stayed at Tologa Bay, Tupaea conversed with the priests of Mauwee, and they rejoiced in the fact that they were able to re-strengthen each other's religious faith. So obviously the religion of Mauwee was far more extensive than what is given to us today, which all that remains today is a few stories about Mauwee putting a rope around the sun and changing the times of the day and fishing New Zealand up out of the ocean. But Tupaea obviously knew the people at Tologa Bay. And I believe that's where this map has been handed over. Something has happened there. And I have always wondered what that discussion was on board the HMS Endeavour that they say went on all night, which is a long time for two different groups of people to speak with each other, considering they have different cultures and different languages. But obviously Tupaea was interpreting, so he could speak the language of the Maoris well enough to have a conversation with them, obviously. So during this meeting at Tologa Bay, there appears to be a meeting between the High Priest of Mauwee of New Zealand and the High Priest of Tahiti, Tupaea, who was well known throughout the Pacific and certainly guided Captain Cook specifically to Tologa Bay. So Tologa Bay is actually a place of great interest. And I think this is how they got this map, which originally would have been carved on wood, of course, not paper. But a copy of this map has obviously been transported all the way back to the British Museum in London, and there it was uplifted by John Pinkerton, and the map appears in the World Atlas of 1813, which, by the way, is a extremely well-written, leather-bound copy. It would have been one of the greatest books published in that year. So Pinkerton himself was a collector and a investigator. A lady gave him a rare coin of Emperor Constantine. He then wrote a book about the Roman Empire. He was acquainted with Gibbon, the historian, and by the latter he was recommended to the booksellers as a fit person to translate a projected work called The English Monkish Historians.